the first time you failed at something? For me, it was so much more memorable than the first time I succeeded. My parents had a lot to do with this. Straight A's were expected in my household, and they were the norm. I envied my friends who received money based on the number of A's, B's, and C's on their report card. They got paid for C's. In my house, anything less than a B plus was highly suspect, and straight A's were what was expected. And we didn't get paid for that. If I got a 96% on a test, my mother would say, "What happened to the other 4%?" And if I started a sentence with, "I'm trying to," my father would interrupt me and say, "Don't try, succeed." And succeed I did. My mother had also somehow brainwashed me into believing that my vet school application would involve my elementary school marks being heavily scrutinized. So if I wanted to be a vet, I would need to have excellent marks in grade 5. I was shocked when my vet school application didn't even want to know my high school grades. I mean, wasn't it important to show a pattern of excellence? I got accepted into vet school after just 2 years of prerequisite courses. I had been told my whole life how hard it was to get into vet school, but this is where my success narrative started. Someone would tell me it was rare to get in after your first try, and the voice in my head would say, "But not for me." Anyone else have that voice? You know things are hard. You know most people don't achieve this goal, but you don't believe that you're most people. This worked out pretty well for me through vet school. There was a lot of things I found hard, but I did well overall. I was so young in vet school, I didn't have a handle on what type of vet I wanted to be. We did not have career fairs or business classes or wellness back then. It wasn't a thing. I decided at the age of 22 that moving to California to do an internship would be a good plan for me. I later learned that your brain isn't fully formed until you are 25, and this makes a lot of sense to me now. I had no idea what I was doing. I applied in the match, and then I went to California in December 1995 to write my NAVLE and my California boards. I didn't know what to expect from the California boards, but I figured studying for the national boards would be good enough. I sailed through the national boards, but I failed the California boards. I was so clueless. This meant I had to pull out of the match of the California internships I'd applied for. And then I didn't match because I had put almost all of my eggs into the California basket. I still managed to get an internship after the match. It was an unpaid internship at the University of Guelph. I don't think they do this anymore because it is unethical and it exploits people. So I had a bit of a glitch there, but a much better internship than I would have had in California, and it was for the best. And I loved being a rotating intern, except for the fact that there was no pay and the incredibly long hours. It was probably one of the most interesting jobs I've ever had. But there were a few issues. I had planned as a veterinarian to never declaw a cat, but one of the surgeons in my internship was very adamant that I should declaw a cat, and also very adamant that I should do what she told me to do. It didn't matter that I politely declined the case or that my intern mate had agreed to declaw the cat. She was going to force me to declaw the cat. So I didn't declaw the cat. And I would do it again. But this, along with some light sexual harassment from a creepy third-year surgery resident, led to a bit of a strained relationship between me and the surgery department. And I know my personality also had something to do with it. The things that make me good at my job now, being outspoken and a strong leader and standing up for what I think is right, don't necessarily make you the favorite intern. And I didn't understand that at the time. I have a strong personality, I guess. But have you ever heard that said about a man? And also, why is that a bad thing? Should we strive to have weak personalities and be bland and mild? How could we ever accomplish anything like that? I tried to get a surgery residency for 3 years. Not matching 3 times was my biggest failures to date. They were public failures and they were devastating. I didn't enjoy general practice and I felt stuck. My first GP job after my internship was with a veterinarian in Western Canada who had a very fancy looking practice. The waterfall in the waiting area sold me, and I thought there must be a direct correlation with the fanciness of the waiting area and the quality of the medicine. Keep in mind that I was only 24 now, so my brain was still not formed. After day one, I knew this was not the job for me. My boss would hit dogs in the back and withhold water from dogs on prednisone so they wouldn't pee so much. And he used the same gown and surgical packs for multiple surgeries. The technicians were not trained animal health technicians, and they would eat sandwiches in the OR. Sandwiches. I tried to talk to my boss about it, but he insisted that the instruments were still sterile after multiple spays. And I wanted to quit, but I was too stubborn. I thought I just didn't like being in general practice and that I needed to suck it up. But it turns out that if you have major philosophical differences with your boss about things like what it means to be a sterile instrument and the pros and cons of a bagged lunch in the OR, it doesn't matter who is right. I was fired after 6 weeks. The letter he gave me said I was more suited to academic practice. My boyfriend had just moved to BC to be with me 1 week before I got fired. And I know 4 other veterinarians that were fired from this job, and then I lost track. That was a lot of failing in a short time, and I tried my best to enjoy my life in Western Canada and my boyfriend and my friends. My brain is pretty much formed at this point, so that was good. And I decided to do a PhD in animal welfare, and I was accepted into a really great program at UBC. I told one of my mentors that I was not going to apply for a surgery residency again. I was done. And he said, well, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And that got stuck in my brain. So I took one more shot and I finally matched for a surgery residency in 2000. Unbelievable to me that my life's trajectory was so heavily influenced by Wayne Gretzky. My surgery residency was hard, but it was good. I was starting to put some of the failure behind me. I got really into surgical oncology and my resident mates were not. So it meant I could take on most of these cases and I loved that. And I applied for the surgical oncology fellowship at Colorado State University. And then I got to feel that familiar feeling again, failure. I wasn't chosen for the program that year and it was the only program available at the time. I stayed at the University of Guelph in a 1-year position and I succeeded in passing my surgery boards that year. I applied to CSU again the following year and I was accepted. No big deal. From there, I have succeeded, on paper at least. There are times when I failed to assess what would be the best job for me, what would make me the happiest. Times when I failed to negotiate my contract well, and times when I failed to get along with some of my colleagues. I have failed to use restraint on the reply to all in the academic toxic email hell. I have failed to save some of my patients. I have failed to get clean margins. I have failed to make my clients happy. I have had papers rejected, and I have failed to satisfy the comments of reviewer number 2. When I was in academia, the interns that didn't match for a residency on match day would always parade into my office in tears. They knew that I had not matched for a residency 3 times. And look at me now. I was a legend. This was their first time failing. You could tell it was their first time. It was the first time that life had kicked the confidence right out of them. They knew it was hard to get a residency, but they had that little voice in their head that said, but not for me. And I would try to give them the best advice that I could. What did they really want in life? Could they see themselves doing something else? Were they willing to keep at it and make the sacrifices to get a residency? What could they do to help their application for next year? And I would give them my best pep talk and send them on their way. And then I would go home and I would tell my husband, I'm the king of the losers. And he would always correct me and say, no, honey, you're the queen of the losers. On the balance, I have succeeded. I have found joy in helping my cancer patients and their owners, and in teaching veterinary students and mentoring early career veterinarians. I was tenured faculty at 2 universities. I have a lot of letters behind my name, and I'm confident about what I excel at. I have a wonderful husband, and we've been together for 24 years. I'm happy. When I speak at veterinary meetings, the introductions only highlight my successes, but I've been thinking, maybe we should just do failure bios. Dr. Boston graduated from the Western College of Veterinary Medicine in 1996. She wanted to move to California for reasons she no longer understands, but this plan was foiled when she failed the California boards. She then went on to do an unpaid internship at the Ontario Veterinary College. She spent 3 years in general practice where she was fired from her first real job after only 6 weeks by a very bad man. She didn't match for a residency for 3 years in a row, which devastated her, but she finally completed a surgery residency in DVSC at the Ontario Veterinary College in 2003. She was rejected from CSU's postdoctoral fellowship program, but tried again the next year because she's so stubborn, and she was accepted. She has a strong personality, which is a misogynistic term reserved for women with opinions about things. She was tenured faculty at the Ontario Veterinary College and the University of Florida. Sometimes she loves veterinary medicine, and sometimes it fails to make her happy. She's a published author, and in her spare time, she is a very, very amateur stand-up comedian. My failures are just as much a part of me now as my successes, maybe more so. Failing made me focus on what I really want. It made me recognize that failure was a possibility, but it also made me not care so much. It made me realize if you really want something, you might have to fight for it. Failure made me strong. Success without struggle can lead to complacency, which leads me to writing and comedy. I believe that getting comfortable with failing is what led me to develop my creative side. If you want to write a book, everyone will tell you how it is impossible to get an agent and impossible to get published. Sure, everything's hard, but that doesn't mean I can't try. I wasn't afraid to fail. My first attempt to write was an online local college program. They matched you with a published author to read your work and critique it. The author I was paired up with and I were a terrible match. He read my drafts and he said that I was an angry young woman. And he suggested that I switch gears and work on a young adult mystery novel about veterinarians. I dropped out. I also remember being thoroughly intimidated by a radio interview with Margaret Atwood about writing. She told a story about being on a cruise ship and meeting a physician. He told her that when he retired, he wanted to write a book. And she responded, well, when I retire, I want to be a physician. Okay, I see her point, but this exchange intimidated me a lot. I had thyroid cancer in 2011, and this experience galvanized me. I wanted to write about it. No one can stop you from writing about your experience. Not the sexist YA author that you had the misfortune to be paired up with, not Margaret Atwood. If you want to be a writer, just write. Find your voice. Even if that voice is an angry young woman, we actually have a lot to be angry about. I wrote about how it felt to have cancer and to be a veterinarian who treats cancer, and I found humor in this situation. I just wrote. I didn't have a plan for what to do with my writing. I just had to get it out and down. I submitted some of this writing for a local writing festival for their amateur stage, and I was rejected. Now, the next thing that happened was just dumb luck, and I know that it makes some prospective authors feel mad, but life will give you devastating failures and amazing lucky successes. You just have to be prepared to receive either one. When I was faculty at the Ontario Veterinary College, we were raising money for their new cancer center, and it was a gala event in Toronto. It was an amazing night, and they asked me to speak. So I read what I had submitted to the Writers' Festival and what would become the first chapter in my new book, Lucky Dog. I was sitting beside a famous author who happened to be married to the president of what would become my publisher. I didn't know who he was at the time, or I would have been too intimidated to talk to him. He took my contact information and said he was going to get me in touch with the best publisher in the country. I didn't believe him, but he did. And from there, I was offered a book deal. It was magical. Writing a book taught me to put myself out there. One of the most common things people say to me about my book is, it is so honest. But I mean, it's memoir. It kind of has to be. That's what memoir means. It's nonfiction. It's the truth. Writing my book also taught me how much I like comedy writing. This led me on a path of taking comedy classes at the Second City and then to stand-up comedy. And one of the most common things people say to me about my stand-up is, you are so brave. Not, you're so funny, which is actually the whole point of stand-up, but you're so brave. And I think I'm brave because there are no consequences to failing at stand-up. Sure, I'll be sad if people don't laugh, but nothing happens. It's just failure. I can do it again. Do I want to make it as a veterinary comedian and have a Netflix special? Of course I do. And everyone tells me how hard it is to be successful as a comedian and how unlikely it is for me to make it. And maybe it is, but maybe not for me. Thank you.